Okay, so you graduated high school, and tell me about after high school.
Well, I guess I don't remember applying anywhere else except for Freed-Hardeman. It was just always understood that that's where I was going to go. And because of all the years I was growing up, I wanted to be a teacher, but all those years of speech competitions and all that, my senior year, my English teacher made some comment that she thought I would be the next Katie Couric after I said a speech or something like that. And I don't know, I think it kind of put a bug in my ear, kind of got me the idea of maybe going into broadcasting. It was something different. Nobody was doing that. And I enjoyed sports. I liked watching sports. I kind of thought maybe I'll do sports broadcasting. There's not a lot of women doing that. And I don't know, my mom made a phone call or daddy made a phone call, and they found out that there was not anyone doing that at Freed-Hardeman for the basketball games. And so the radio station there, they were currently doing that, but they were just doing like updates on site, like just giving the scores. And anyway, so they kind of created a position for me. I had a partial scholarship from Lads to Leaders, Leaderettes, and all I had to do for that was go do a booth at their convention in the spring, but got some money for doing that too. And went early for Interface, which was the kind of a welcome week, and it was just like a camp reunion. Saw so many people that I knew from camp, and I met Lori, who is still one of my best friends, and she was in my Interface group, and it was just a lot of fun. But I did not do well in my classes because I had let someone arrange my schedule, and I had upper level classes that I shouldn't have been taking yet. So I made some bad grades my first semester, and it was funny that I came home over Christmas break and Daddy said, "All right, quit chasing the boys." And then when I came back in January, that's when I met Corey. And I was friends with Michelle Pritchard, who had gone to Harding Academy with Corey, and I always hung out with her and her boyfriend at the time. His name was Ronnie, and our friend Hef, who was also Michelle, but we called her Hef. And so we were all sitting at the table, and Corey came up to the table and was telling a story, and they were all laughing, and I think they just vaguely introduced me. I don't know. I can't remember if they introduced us while you were standing there or...
No, I was between classes.
It was later, I guess, but as you walked off, after they were laughing, and I said, "Who was that?" And she was just like, immediately, "Oh, you want me to introduce you?" And I was like, "Okay, slow down. I was just asking who it was, Y'all were all laughing and having a good time. I just wondered who, just kind of blew in and blew out." And it's funny. I don't even remember the course of events of us actually being introduced, or, I'm sure she dropped a hint. I don't know. But I remember also seeing you running from practice one Wednesday night. I was in the cafeteria. I was sitting there with Hef, and we were eating dinner before we went to church, and you were running back to go change out of your uniform to go to church. And so I remember thinking that was really cool. And so you called me on a Saturday afternoon and asked me out, and I said, "Well, I have to work at the basketball game. I have to do the radio station." And I don't know if you know this, but I remember like I was sitting up there and I remember seeing you come to the game. Like I saw where you were sitting and you were sitting with the students, but I was up on the other side. And my parents came to the game because they came to almost every home game. And it was 2.5 hours away. And I know that you still think that I arranged it, but they were already on their way when you called and invited, asked me out.
I never thought that. If I ever said it, I meant it just
anyway,
to you.
They met you at halftime, and of course, Mother says then she knew you were the one. But we went to eat after the game, and at Perigo's Pizza. And I remember exactly what I was wearing. I remember, being nervous, but wanting to, just wanting to tell you all about myself. Talking was my thing.
Was?
Yeah. And I guess maybe the next week I was playing basketball intramural and you came to watch me and I was goofing off at halftime and I sprained my ankle and you and a couple other people carried me out to the car and we went to Jackson, which was about 30 minutes away, to the ER. And Hef drove my car, and you and I were in the back seat, but I remember thinking you were sitting there with me and Hef and Michelle and Ronnie, and we were all, y'all were all trying to lift my spirits, and I thought, this is pretty cool that he's hanging out for all this, I knew they would do it, because they were my friends, but, and I liked that you knew Michelle, it helped, so, I don't know, that's kind of where it took off, and then we were going to go out again, and my friend from camp, Stacy Rowe, called me and said she wanted to come and visit, and she was coming from Murray, Kentucky, or wherever she lived, somewhere in Kentucky. And I remember you were like, I told you I couldn't go out, but we could still hang out, but she was coming. And I remember that you stopped me, or I stopped you in front of the campus mailboxes, and you were like, do you want to go out with me or not?
No. The timing is wrong. The Stacy thing happened before our first date. I wouldn't have done that.
No.
I knew we were interested, yes.
No, Corey.
Our first date.
When she came, I had a sprained ankle. I have pictures of her, and when I had the sprained ankle, and I was like, I promise, I'm not making her up.
Okay.
And anyway, as I recall, I still went out with you, and she stayed in my room. Like, we hung out. She and I hung out during the day, and I was like, I'm going to hang out with him.
I'm questioning the timeline here.
Anyway, but from there it was seeing each other a lot. We would go to we really did not see each other until maybe after chapel. Because you always had early classes. I had some early classes, and we'd go to chapel, which was at 10:30 every day, and then it seems like we would eat lunch together, and then hang out after class. You would have practice, and then I would always wait for you to go to dinner. So that was our routine for that semester. And when I went home that semester, that summer, I worked in a law office in the mornings, just typing and answering phones and that kind of thing. And then some of the nights I would work at a shaved ice stand that my sister-in-law managed. I hated it, but it was easy money. And then sophomore year, I changed my major to education, and school became a little bit easier. Made a lot of really good friends in those classes.
Did you know that I was considering leaving that second year. My plan was to leave that second after that semester.
After your sophomore year. Yeah.
The year we met, and we had been dating a few months, and I told Chuck Box that I was considering staying, and he considered giving me a bigger scholarship to play baseball one more year and stay one more year, and I did.
Yeah.
I ran out of classes to take, and so I took general ed classes mostly that third year.
Yeah.
I stayed at Freed Hardeman. But almost, if I hadn't met you, I would have been gone the second year.
Yeah.
Back to Memphis.
Yeah. So, I mean, sophomore year, we got our chapel seats together. I still don't recall really like meeting you for breakfast or anything like that. We kind of did our own thing during the day, and then always had dinner together. And it was just a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun being there together every day with our friends on campus. And then when I went home that summer, I got to work at Space Camp as a Space Camp counselor in Huntsville, and that was really, really fun. I enjoyed that. That was the summer I worked at Space Camp and you worked at Graceland. So we had the... And
we had the 1-800 number to hook up.
Yeah. And then and then that Christmas too, I also worked at Space Camp. But I went back my junior year. You stayed in Memphis. I also sang with Sunshine Singers, a traveling group, kind of a choir. It was a choir, not a small group, but I enjoyed that, but I was really not happy. My roommates were gone a lot because they played volleyball, and then you were gone, and most weekends I just came to Memphis to stay with you or visit with you. And then when my roommate got in trouble and got sent home, that was kind of like, you know what, I think I want to go home too. And so I went home and immediately started taking classes at Athens State University, started taking a lot of education classes, a lot of my general ed classes. I think I took a handful of classes at Calhoun Community College, all in an effort to, it wasn't like I was trying to graduate from there. I was just trying to continue, towards my degree. But, I think you and I both knew that we were headed towards being married. But at some point, I realized that I was taking too many classes that were not going to transfer. When you get into the upper level classes, a lot of them don't transfer across programs. So I decided to stop going to school, and I don't even remember what year and when this would have been. So in 94, fall of 94 is when I was there by myself, and then I came home. So 95, I would say maybe spring of 95 is when I started working at South Tech Sales. Worked there for about a year before we got married. Does that sound about right?
That sounds right.
I answered an ad in the newspaper, which is how we found jobs back then. And they just wanted receptionist, and they had secretarial, data entry. And I had done that. Oh, I had done that at Freed Hardeman too. I forgot to mention that. I worked for the admissions office and did dictation, and it was something I really enjoyed doing. And so I called them, and they called me back and wanted me to come and I don't remember if I sent a resume. I wouldn't have sent a resume because I would have had to mail it. So I don't even know how I had contacted them. Obviously, I had called maybe and left a message, and they called me back and wanted to interview with me. So I met Al and Charlotte Dean, who ran the business, and I loved working with them. They thought I was the smartest person they had ever met because I could create a spreadsheet and do data entry and do all the things on the computer. And that was really a blessing to get to work with them. And it was the office was in a parsonage next to a church, so it was kind of odd, but it was, it was their indicator, so it was not far from home, and they were just really sweet to me. And she was really sympathetic to our dating long distance, and she got to where Charlotte would say, "Why don't you just come in at noon on Monday?" And then she got to where she'd let me leave early on Friday. So, and we moved offices and moved into downtown Decatur, but I really enjoyed working there. And all during that year, you and I were driving back and forth visiting each other. You were really in your upper level classes and interning. Yeah. And so we were both pretty busy, but we had our weekends free, so that was good. And, I would come to visit you and you would come to visit me. And at first it was like, every 2 or 3 weeks, but once we got engaged, it was every weekend. And there was planning to do. And
we wanted it that way.
Yeah. So, spring of 95 is when I started at South Tech. And I don't even remember when we went to look at rings, but it was before Christmas. But I remember that you came at that Christmas, and I had picked out a couple of rings, and you were going to decide which one, that you could tell which one I liked. And I remember you said your dad said that if I said no, you could come back home and you had to go squirrel hunting or something.
Yeah.
So we got engaged at December of 95, and we were married in June of 96, so we only had a 6-month engagement. We got married at the church. I had all my bridesmaids were, a mixture of childhood friends and friends from college, and my sister and sister-in-law, and you kind of were the same, friends from high school and friends from college, and your brother and your dad. And I remember being really proud of the music that we picked. It was different than most people had at the time. It was really customized. And I created a little program that I remember we printed in Daddy's office. And the girls and I sat and folded them all the night before the wedding. And we had planned our honeymoon to go to Mexico, and my parents kind of panicked the night before, like, wait a minute, we're not sure we know where your birth certificate is. Because all those years of playing sports, we always had to show our birth certificate. And we had misplaced the one that has the raised seal on it. So Daddy made a copy and somehow rubbed it across a silver dollar or something to try to make it feel like it had anyway, nobody ever cared. Nobody even looked. I mean, they looked at it, but nobody was checking to see that it was original but I mean, everybody came in for the wedding. You and all your guys stayed at the hotel, and I had the girls staying with me. And I had picked out dresses from the JCPenney catalog. There were just some suits. And I thought, oh, those are nice. They can wear those again. I mean, they were awful. Pearl buttons and shiny texture, but
they never wore them.
They never wore them. Actually, that's not true. Amy Lyons wore hers for Hef's wedding a few months later. Okay. She was the only one that she was like, hey, it fit me. It was appropriate, so she wore it again. Hef got married not long after me, but Hef was not in the wedding because she'd just had a baby. Hef had just had a baby, Candace had just had a baby, and Christy had just had a baby. That all three had babies right before within a couple of months of each other. Those boys are all married and have their own kids. But we got married at the church. We had the rehearsal dinner there. We got married at Hartselle Church of Christ, and the ladies of the church did the reception, and they made a little picnic basket for us. And when I remember we got to the hotel, we opened it up, and they had filled it with all of the food from the reception, and they put a card in there, and the card was like signed by all my bridesmaids and some of the ladies that had helped with that. And I remember Amy Lyons said, she wrote something like, I know today is going to be hectic, but hoping that reading these words is a special moment for you, or something like that. It was just very, typical of her to say the right thing, But I remember we went to eat at Chili's right next to the hotel, and we were like, we just got married, and he was like, and you're here?
I know.
Like, why are you at Chili's?
Well, we couldn't find a place in Memphis. Memphis was booked up because of the golf tournament. You could not.
And
find
I was
a hotel.
mortified because they spelled married wrong on the back of our car. They had just married, M-A-R-I-E-D.
No surprise, I couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah. So what happens when you let a bunch of baseball players decorate your car?
I think that was Harding Academy.
Yeah.
People.
But they had
Stephen
put
Brown.
Vaseline. We left in my little Saturn, 4-door Saturn that I had bought, and they put Vaseline all up under the door handles, and it was June, the heat of June. And I remember we went to the car wash, and you tried to, get it all out, but that summer, every summer that it was really hot.
If that car exists now, it's running.
It's still running down
now.
it. You could see it running down it when it would get really hot. So that was June. You graduated May of 96. We got married June of 96. I went back to school. I started at Memphis in the fall of 96. And then I graduated in December of 98. So I had a full year of taking classes, and then I did my student teaching in the fall of 98. So I guess I had 2 years of taking classes. But, and in the summers, 2 summers in a row, I worked at a child care program at this church in North Raleigh, North Memphis. And it was just, they called it a summer camp, but it was basically child care for kids that were elementary age that, didn't really want to be in a daycare, but they couldn't be home. And, we hung out with them all day, and we'd do, I don't remember, they played outside, and this church had their own sets of roller skates. These kids would roller skate almost every afternoon. But at one point, I decided that I wanted to teach them we did a play, kind of a musical thing. So we worked on that in the afternoons too. And, but I think I did really enjoy that. I enjoyed the people that I worked with, but, it helped me in, becoming a teacher, working with kids and organizing things. And so I did my student teaching in 3rd grade at Bartlett Elementary, and then in 5th grade somewhere in the city on North Watkins. That one was awful. I loved my 3rd grade placement. Debbie Parrish was my cooperating teacher. We're still Facebook friends. I remember her, just complimenting me and telling me what a great job I did. And the first day I had my placement in the city, I was so upset. I drove straight to Bartlett Elementary after school and cried and she just hugged me and, you know, told me it was going to be fine. And she told me, you know, you just got to get through it. You know, back then you had to do a placement in the city and a placement in the county. And thank goodness my placement in the county was 9 weeks and my placement in the city was 6 weeks. So it was always a 9-week placement and a 6-week placement. Some people got their 9-week in the city and their 6-week in the county. But anyway, about 2 weeks into the city placement is when Grammy got sick, or when Grammy died. And I left in the middle of the day. You know, you called the school, my mom had called you, and we left. And of course, with all of the things, you know, like we were there the day she died, and then helped with planning the funeral. I mean, we were there. I think we were there almost a full week, if not maybe 5 days. But so that was a whole week. I want to say maybe I was in my 3rd week of that placement. Okay, so that would have been a whole week there. And when I got back, that teacher was like, I'm just going to sign off on it. You're good. Like, she signed off on the paper. She wanted her class back, you know. And I had done, I mean, it wasn't anything about me. She just really wanted her class back. She was like, just, you know, do what you need to do, the paperwork you need to get done. I'll sign whatever I need to sign to help you finish. But I'm telling you, you don't have to do anything. And that was kind of a blessing. Yes. I didn't want to. I mean, it made me sick to my stomach to have to go there every day. I hated it. It was really sad, because those kids, I had been working with those 3rd graders in Bartlett. And then when I get to this 5th grade class, I think they were 6th grade. Anyway, they were bigger than me, and they were reading the same books that those 3rd graders were reading. Like, the books that they were choosing for themselves in the library were the same books the 3rd graders were reading in Bartlett. So I, you know, saw right then that it was definitely a deficit, you know, in the city with those kids. But anyway, graduated. Granddaddy came. I graduated at the my graduation ceremony was at the Pyramid, and right away I got into an interim teaching position at Arlington Elementary. Susan Wiseman was having a baby. We went to church together, and I remember we were just sitting there in Bible class one time, and she was talking about leaving her class, and I said, well, who's taking your class? And she said, well, I guess they'll just put an interim in there. And I said, well, do you think I could do it? And she was like, all I got to do is turn your name in, and that was it. She turned my name in, and I got to take her class. So I started that in January for 6 weeks, and then the secretary at Arlington Elementary, her husband was the principal at Houston Middle, and they had an opening coming up. And so that teacher, she was supposed to only be out 6 weeks, but there was only 9 weeks left in the school year, so she just took the rest of the year. And so I went and did an interim there, and was fully expecting to put my name in, apply for a full-time teaching position. And sometime in March or April, found out I was pregnant with Ben. So then I was like, well, I guess I'm not applying for a full-time position. So Elizabeth Patterson taught at Barrett's Chapel, and there was a teacher that was not going to start the school year, but had, she had a baby over the summer, or maybe she had the baby in August. So she came for meet the teacher so she could meet the kids. But she had a full binder prepared for me, how to do everything in her class. And I loved that. But that year they were starting something. They were doing a test run of smaller classroom sizes. So I only had 15 kids in the class. And we tested them a lot, but I loved it. And there was a little boy in that class named Ben. And that was kind of where I fell in love with the name Ben. He had such good manners, and there had been a little boy in that third grade class also named Ben. And I don't know, I think a lot of teachers do that. You associate names with kids, and I don't know, that just seemed to be a name that we both kind of liked. And we used Garner from Corey's dad and his grandfather, so that's how we came up with Ben Garner. I got the name. My dad got my name from a student that he had named Joy, and so I guess it's funny that I did the same thing.
Yeah.
I remember I kept leaving I always walked around with a big cup that always had something, Coke or tea or something in it, and I would always forget to take it with me to the cafeteria because I would refill it. That at Barrett's Chapel especially, they had sweet tea that those cafeteria ladies made for the teachers. It was not for the students. And it was in a big dispenser. And so I would always take that with me because I wanted to fill my cup up. And I forgot it, and I would always send him back because he was just one of those kids. You could just ask him to do it, and he'd say, "Yes, ma'am." And he would go do it, and he'd bring me my cup. And I remember him saying, "Miss Williams, if you do it for 30 days in a row, it becomes a habit." I still remember that. He had read that somewhere, I guess. And I was like, "Well, I haven't done it for 30 days. And he was like, "Okay, maybe not in a row." But I thought that was so cute that he was reminding me that if I did it too many times in a row, it would become a habit. So I went from there, and then I finished at a school in North Bartlett, and I hated that one. Oh, it was awful. The kids were so bad. It was 5th grade, Rivercrest Elementary. I remember there specifically there was a girl that had a very bad temper, and I had been warned that she could get physical, and I was pretty pregnant by that time. And I thought, well, I'm not challenging this girl. And so because I didn't, I think she saw real quick that I wasn't going to challenge her. But, I mean, there were some things that I liked about that job, because the kids were getting older. They were older, but there was no discipline. You could tell the teacher that had been in that class did not have discipline. So they were not used to structure and things that I liked. And anyway, one weekend we had a baby shower on Saturday, and my parents came up to visit. They were living in Alabama at the time. And the next day we had been to one class about birthing, labor and delivery class, childbirth class. And they had kind of talked about how to time your contractions. And, but they had said the contractions, you would feel them in your stomach. Well, we went to church one morning, and at that time we had 2 services. We'd have a morning service, then Bible class, then another worship service. And we always went to the 8 o'clock. And we went to the 8 o'clock service, and I remember going to my friend Tammy Sanders and saying, "I don't think we're going to stay. My back is hurting." And she had 3 kids. And she was like, how does your back hurt? And she was like, "Is it coming and going, or is it all the time?" And I was like, "Well, it's kind of coming and going." And she said, "You might want to go home and call your doctor." And so we went home, and I remember I made lasagna with elk meat, because that's what we used. We were still using elk meat that your dad had killed. And we watched Contact on TV, and we just sat there in the living room with my parents, and we started timing them. And they got pretty close together. They kept coming, and they were like, when they're 2 minutes apart, we want you to come to the, so I checked back in because at that some point in the afternoon, they got pretty close together. Like from the beginning of one to the beginning of the next one was 2 minutes. And so, of course we get to the hospital and we're joking all the way there. He can't come. We don't have the bed put together, blah, blah, blah. I mean, we had the room painted, but that was about it. We didn't have anything else done. So I was 32 weeks and 8 months pregnant and, supposed to be back at work on Monday in a classroom. And I get to the hospital and they checked me and I was already dilated. And they were like, well, there's no turning back now. So they gave me all kinds of medicine to try to stop everything. And he just came on early. And so he was born at like 11 o'clock that night. And
8 weeks early.
8 weeks early. He was 4 pounds and 2 ounces. But he was already 18 or 19 inches long, so he looked like a little praying mantis. He was so long. And they let us see him for like a second, and then they took him to the NICU. And I remember he came in, so this was the Sunday before Thanksgiving. And they came in and said he might be home by Christmas. I remember the neonatologist came in and, he said, there's a lot of things he's got to learn how to do. He's early. He's on all the machines and he's doing all the things he needs to do, but he might not be home until Christmas. So they did not, give us any false hope. They said gave it to us straight. And they sent me to put me in a room, and at some point I woke up, after all of the medicine and everything wore off, and I got up and I walked. It's just crazy now because I know that's why they were like, get back in bed. But, because I had an epidural, blocking a nerve block on, of my legs. And I got up and walked out to the hallway and was like, where is my baby? I knew he was in the NICU, but I wanted to see him. And they were like, get back in the bed. And they were like, we'll bring him to you. We didn't know you were awake or whatever. So they didn't bring him to me, but they said, we'll help you get dressed or whatever in the morning. You'll put you in a wheelchair and we'll take you down there. So, but I couldn't sleep. And so I went and got a paper towel out of the bathroom and I wrote Ben a letter. And of course, later when I got home, I laminated it. But that's in his baby book. And we got to see him, and I got to go home. A couple of days later, they let me stay a little longer than I was supposed to, I'm sure. But went home, and he stayed in the hospital for 14 days, and I would go up every day to visit him, and I pumped milk to bring up there to him, and they acted like that he could have nothing else. And thankfully that worked for me, but I felt sorry for somebody else that it might not have worked for, because those nurses and doctors in the NICU acted like breast milk was all they would feed those babies. But I remember being, I would get up in the middle of the night and I would call, and I would want to check on him, and they would go over to his little isolette and put the phone there and say, if you want to say hello, I've got the phone. Those nurses were just wonderful. They knew how hard it was to be there without your baby. So, he came home on a monitor because it was called an apnea monitor, and to monitor his breathing because they were afraid that he might stop breathing. And I think that we hated every minute of that, but they would have to come and download the data, and but we found out that he did have an actual apnea, at one point, so I guess it was good. But the apnea meant that he'd stop breathing for 20 seconds or 25 seconds. I can't remember what they said. But
the monitor was cool.
the monitor always gave us false alarms, but
It rubbed his skin.
by the time he was 2 months old, he got to come off of that, and he was sleeping through the night. And he had some physical therapy that he went to early on, but really by that time he caught up and was doing all the things that he was supposed to do. I mean, he did everything a little bit late compared to babies that were born full term, and of course I couldn't help but compare him to the other kids that were in his age group. But he always seemed to he was happy. He wasn't chubby, but he wasn't too skinny. I remember thinking that maybe he was jaundiced, and the doctor just said, "Oh, he's just a pretty baby." And he just was always dark-skinned and had blonde hair. And I just loved being a mom. And I don't know. You're going to ask me anything specific about that? I mean...
No, I do want to go backwards a little bit and ask, how was the adjustment after we got married and going into living in that little apartment of ours that we lived in for a year?
Yeah,
You didn't
so
know
I
anyone in Memphis?
went straight from living with my parents to living in the dorm to living with my parents to being married and living in that apartment. And I moved to Memphis, and I knew no one except my friend Michelle, and who I really didn't see all that often. And we started going to church at Sycamore View. And I made some friends. I recognized some people that we went to school with. Bill and Stephanie Lee, and Eddie and Shelley Eaton, and Eric and Betsy Hutchins. And then I knew Kelly and Tammy because Kelly had been your friend from high school. So that we got involved pretty quickly with the Bible class and with our youth group. Not youth group. Yeah, we helped with the youth group. And I think once we started doing all that, it was easy to get acclimated. And then when we had Ben, they gave us a baby shower, and everybody our age was having babies, so it was we had little play groups, and there was always something to do. And when Ben was about 15 months old, I decided I wanted to try to teach at our church had a daycare. They call it Mother's Day Out. And I started working in one of the classes, and then an opening, like I was a sub. But I remember being kind of heartbroken because the day that he stood up and walked, he was in that nursery class with Bess Newtalk. And she brought him across the hall and showed me. Like, she sat him down, and he stood up and did it, but I missed the first time that he did it. And I was like, man, this is the whole reason I was here, so I could be with him. And I still missed it, But, I was doing it, too, because I wanted him to be around kids and, anyway, and then funny enough, Miranda Caskey, I was going to work with her in teaching the 4-year-old class. And she had just had Connor, her second one, and he had started having some issues, and they thought that he was having seizures. And it was just too much for her. Like, there was just too much that concerned her about that. and she decided to back out of teaching. And so Stephanie Lee lived right down the road, and we were close. And I remember she just came over one day, to hang out. She and Savannah would come down all the time for the kids to just play in the backyard. And I was like, hey, do you want to teach the 4-year-olds with me at Sycamore View? And she was like, sure, sounds like fun. And I mean, that was it. It was, we did that, and we kind of transformed that. And I decided I wanted it, because one of the 3-year-old class that was already there, they were the stars. And no other class up there had like a mascot or a whatever like that. And I decided.
Popcorn?
Ben made popcorn.
Okay. I was trying to figure out what that smell was.
I decided that we were going to have a class name too. And so she and I had been going to some training classes with a company called Frog Street Press. And we were going to be using their curriculum. And so I was like, oh, let's do Froggy Fours. And then we came up with all these, like everything in the room was like frog themed. And it was so fun. And they still, to this day, that is still called the Froggy Fours. And we created events like it was all alphabet based, like it was letter of the week. And, letter A, we'd have a snack that was letter A. But the letter E, so A, B, C, D, E, you're 5 weeks into the school year. Kids are getting to know each other. We would have an elegant event. And it was like a formal sit-down lunch. And, like, we prepared elbow macaroni. So it's macaroni and cheese. And anyway, we came up with all these letter E foods, but the boys would escort the girls into the room, and so the girls would wear a fancy dress, and we had the boys, dress up too, and they still do that event too.
Wow.
Yes. So I'm very proud of that legacy, that we kind of started. And I mean, it's like I tell people I was the first Froggy Force teacher, and all of those kids are like married and have kids now. But it was just 1 year, and towards the end of that year is when Stephanie's dad died, and that was tough because I had to finish the school year without her, and then the next year we just had some kids that were not trouble, but just gave us trouble. And it just seemed like we kind of argued the whole year with our director, about what to do with these kids. And at that time, you and I we were trying to, I was trying to get pregnant again, and it wasn't happening. And, I had to start taking some medicine for that. And it was just so much stress. And then at the end of that school year, Stephanie's brother died from the same. He had pancreatic cancer just like her dad had. And he also died just a couple of days within, the year after her dad died. So it was tough. And I just decided then I don't want to do this anymore. And she had decided she was going to go back to teaching in the city full time. So she wasn't coming back. And so we both quit. And somebody else took over that class. A friend of ours, Elizabeth Patterson, took it over, and she continued it as Froggy Fours, and some other, people over the years have taken it, and they still call it Froggy Fours. But that was Ben. We started him at Germantown Church. That was when we moved to Germantown. We started him at Germantown Church of Christ. And I should say, like, the month I quit teaching is when I found out I was pregnant with Jake. It was like no more stress, no more anxiety. And it was like my body, could relax or whatever. So we moved to Germantown and got
Wait
this.
Let me go backwards a little bit more. Let's talk about our first house. We lived in an apartment first for a year, right after we got married. And so we had a lease for 1 year, and we started looking for a house, which we found. But tell us about that.
Well, your mom found it because she went to a yard sale there.
Yes. Across the
And-
street from the yard.
Oh, across the street from the
Yes,
yard sale?
and
Oh,
she said
okay.
that the neighbor
Oh, okay. I thought it was at that
was gonna
house.
put the house up for sale.
Yeah.
They hadn't put the sign in the yard yet.
Yeah, so we went and looked at it, and it was rough. I mean, it had not been. Nobody had lived in it for several years. The lady that had lived there was in assisted living or a nursing home, and she had died, and so the daughter and son-in-law were going to be selling it, and they were like from Florida, so they had no idea what the house was worth, and we bought that house for $57,000, which was crazy because everything else in that neighborhood was like 70, 80,000.
Yeah.
And that was our budget. So we bought this house. It was way under our budget. It was definitely affordable, and we planned right away to do some things to it. So the kitchen had metal cabinets, original cabinets,
1940.
and I mean there was an inch
Whatever.
of grease all over everything in that kitchen. But it was a little galley kitchen. The house itself was barely 1,100 square feet. It was, it was a cute little ranch house, brick. The front, we walk in as a living room, dining room combo with hardwood floors. She had shag carpet all over the house, and when we tore that carpet up, the floors were in pretty good condition. So we kept
Hardwood underneath.
we kept the hardwood in the living room and dining room. We took the cabinets out. We didn't gut it like to the studs, but we took the cabinets out. I remember we put them on the street, and somebody came and bought them for, to put like in their garage or something. And Corey, we bought those cabinets from Home Depot that you put together, and Corey and his dad and
And your dad.
and my dad came and helped us put those up, and everybody helped. We painted and
Put linoleum floor.
put
down.
linoleum floor down in the kitchen.
All
But
new appliances.
in the bedrooms, we had new carpet. But we did all the painting and everything, obviously, before we did the carpet. But, we did all of that before our lease was up. And so we were able to move in and, did all of it ourselves. The kitchen, the bathrooms, the tile in the bathroom, the hall bathroom was peach and brown. It was awful. I never could find anything to make that more subtle, but it is what it is. And then our half bath was blue, like powder blue, was not cute. But there was wallpaper everywhere, and so I just put more wallpaper down. So we had wallpaper in the bathrooms and wallpaper in the kitchen. I remember I did some flowers and some striped wallpaper. And then we had some wallpaper up to the halfway in the living room, and then we painted the upper part. But we lived there for 8 years. We had planned that had the wrought iron on the front porch, and we took that down and put up a wood and spindle railing, and Corey poured a little walkway to the front, and we planted a tree in the front yard. We have a picture of us with Ben on his second birthday, and we're standing in front of that little bitty pin oak, which is an enormous tree now.
Yep.
I love driving by there and seeing that big tree.
Yeah, we planted that. That tree came from the
Mississippi.
bottom pasture in
Mhm.
Mississippi.
Yeah. And we had before we had Ben, we had a little cat. That was our first pet. We had a little cat named Molly. She was a little Siamese tabby mix. And she was the coolest thing. You could wad up paper and throw it up in the air, and she would catch it and sort of bring it back to you. She'd bring it back a little bit, but she always would catch it. It didn't matter how high up we tossed that. She would, and you could wad up paper from anywhere in the house, and she would come running. It was the cutest thing, and she was such a cuddler. And I remember right around the time that Grammy died, she got run over, and we came home one night, and she was in our front yard. So that was really sad. But I remember I remember that I was teaching, and we got another cat, and we named her Cassie, and she actually moved to the Germantown house with us, but she got sick and did not make it much longer after we moved here. And we didn't have another pet until the kids were a little bit older. But anyway, when we bought that house for $57,000, and then we sold it for $110,000, and we felt really good about that.
Which gave us a big jump on buying another house.
Yeah.
I mean, we turned a big profit. We had a lot of equity in it.
And we had a lot of money saved up.
And we had money saved up, so we were able to put a big amount down on the house in Germantown.
So in 2003, I mean, we had been looking out in Collierville thinking that was really what we could afford. And the houses in Collierville were a little bit newer, bigger bathrooms, all of the things that, they had a pretty good school system. But, the place to be was Germantown. And I remember that you came home from work one day and you were like, the interest rates have dropped and I think we can afford Germantown. And I was like, what? It was crazy. Kevin and Caressa had already bought a house in Germantown. Right?
I don't remember.
I can't remember if they moved first or if we moved.
They might have.
But anyway, no, we did first, I think. But anyway, we were doing it because Ben was going to be starting school and we wanted to be, established. So when we moved, I remember, we put the sign in our yard on D Road, and the first person to look at it was the person that bought it. We put it up the same weekend as the Italian festival because it was down the street from where we lived, and we knew there would be a lot of people driving by. And ironically, it was also the same week that you had surgery on your face because you'd had your softball accident. So I remember that we put the sign in the yard, but you were laying on the couch recovering from surgery.
Yeah.
So that, we got it under contract pretty fast, but so we started looking, and we did get an agent to work with us, and we found a house that we liked. I don't know, I think you were hesitant anyway, but when we did the inspection, we discovered that there was, stuff, the pool in the back was leaking, and the whole house was shifting because of it. And back then, you could put a dollar amount, like if the repairs are more than $2,500, we're out and we get our earnest money back. That's not the case now. Now you can walk for any reason. But I remember, I hated it. I loved that house, but there were a lot of wonky things about it, that were weird. And the people they had put it on the market for less than they paid for it. I remember us being like, why are they willing to do this? Of course, now we know why. So, anyway, and this is part of the reason why you always said I needed to get into real estate. I remember that, so once we failed that contract, we had to hoof it because we had to find another house. And I remember that we looked at 11 houses in one day, and like 6 of them had pools. It was just this area, but I can remember every single house that we looked at, and I can remember everything about them and where they were located. And but I just remember we walked into this one. Of course, it's June, and they had all of the windows open in the sunroom, and we walked in the front door, and all you could see straight through to the pool and the banana trees, and it just looked really nice. Mm-hmm. And it was the first house that we walked into. There was just nothing weird about it. Like so many houses we walked into, they were using the dining room as an office, or they had taken walls down between rooms. And anyway, this was a 2,600 square foot house, and it was a lot of house for the three of us, but I was pregnant with Jake. And so we bought this one for $197. And
A little bit above asking.
Yeah, we paid a little, we offered a little, I think they were asking $195 and we came in at $197. And, you know, worked out. And, you know, there was a lot of wallpaper in this house, and I remember trying to take some of it off and we couldn't get it off, so we painted over so much of it. Caressa helped me hang wallpaper in the foyer. And, you know, it had this, you know, we had the galley kitchen. You know, here's the thing, you know, from Collierville, you know, we'd been looking at these houses with the big spa bathrooms and bigger living areas. And I really gave all of that up because I knew the value of the school system. I knew I was not going to be living in my bedroom and my bathroom. So the value in this home, number one, the home values had always retained in this area, but also I was buying a school district. And that kind of tells the tale for the rest of our time here. We've stayed here because of the schools and because of our involvement in the community. And the schools have been very important. And the kids have felt at home here. And all of this time, we've remained members at Sycamore View Church of Christ and raised our kids there and been involved in church and the youth group and Bible classes and church camp. And even though it was not here in Germantown, I don't regret doing that. So both of the boys went to Germantown Church of Christ preschool, and we had Allie, and she did too. Jake actually went 1 year back at Sycamore View because when I was pregnant with Allie, I actually started working in the church office. And I was just doing the bulletin, the Sunday bulletin, and that one day that I would go into work, he would go to Mother's Day out, and he really needed that because Ben was in kindergarten and he was really attached to me, and he needed that. And but then once I had Allie, you know, he stayed at home with me, and then I think in that next school year, he went to Germantown Church of Christ preschool, and she did too. She only went 1 day a week. But I continued to work in the church office just 1 day a week. I kind of called that my Mother's Day out. They would go to Germantown Church of Christ preschool, but then I drove to Sycamore View to work. But I enjoyed doing that, and I did that for 8 years. And, you know, it really wasn't about what I was getting paid. It was about feeling like I was, you know, getting to do something. Yeah. And I enjoyed working with Kathy McCoy all those years. She and I are still really good friends because of that. Just really, really close friends. And started my little at-home business, Joyfully Created. Somebody gave me some luggage tags when I had Ben to go on his diaper bag. And I remembered thinking, oh, these are cute. I could probably make these. And I made them, you know, for the next baby shower that I went to. And everybody was like, you made these? Will you make some for me? I'll pay you. And so then a friend of mine said, you should come up with a name for your business. And so I came up with the name Joyfully Created. And back then I had a friend named Elizabeth that was she was sewing and doing embroidery. And then people had like Pampered Chef businesses, and some people sold jewelry. And so we used to do little home parties. And I would take orders for luggage tags and personalized stationery, and you know, I didn't make much money at it, but I enjoyed doing it. And then over the years, I, you know, started doing vinyl and added that to it. And then when I started doing photography, I also called that Joyfully Created. So once the kids got into school, once Ben started kindergarten, that really started my time as a volunteer in the schools.
But let's stop. You talked about making things for Joyfully Created. At what point did you start working in the craft cabin at camp?
I didn't do that until the summer after Jake was in kindergarten.
Okay.
So the Sycamore View has a church camp, and for years and years it was held at this 4-H camp in, it doesn't matter, I don't remember where it was, Milan, Tennessee. And I never went. Ben went 1 year when it was there, and he got strep the first night he was there, and missed some of the week. But that camp closed, and so they had to find another place for it to take place. And as I mentioned, I loved church camp, and so I wanted my kids to go to camp. And this was different because they were going to camp with kids from our church, but it's still camp, sleeping away from home, and with your friends and all of that. So I had always been, kind of crafty and making things. I had began sewing because I started sewing when Jake was about 2. I started making clothes and, trying at sewing clothes for him and myself, and just learning how to do things. I was never afraid to throw something in the trash if it didn't turn out. So, but I guess I was kind of known for being creative. And so when they found this camp, they needed somebody to take over the craft house, because at the Milan camp, it was ran by the 4-H staff and they did their own. So they wanted to continue offering crafts. And so in the summer of 2010 was when that started. So that was the summer after Jake finished kindergarten. And so he was not old enough to be a camper. Ben was a camper. Jake was a pre-camper, and Jake stayed in the room with me. So out at Rose of Sharon campground, that was when I started camp, craft house coordinator. And I had like foam visors. Marshmallow shooters was always on the list. That kind of came over from Milan. That was something that they had started there, something kind of like that. But it's funny to see. I'm pretty proud of what it has turned into. It is, started out with maybe 5 or 6 things for the kids to make, and now we have a whole catalog of things that they can make. This year was my 15th year to teach, to do the craft house, and we have, when we first started, it was just me and 2 other people that ran it, and now we have 6 people that work in there, and it is the busiest job I've ever had, but I love every minute of it. And this was the last year that I did it as a parent, like with a kid at camp, and so I was asked if I would be returning next year, and I said that I would. So
Legacy continues.
I haven't promised anything after next year, but I just said, let me see how I feel without a kid here. So.
You ready for a break?
Yeah.
All right. We made it to Jake being born, right?
No, we made it up to Ben starting kindergarten and
Okay.
Allie being born.